Welcome in on a Thursday. I'm Juliette Goodrich. We are live from Chicago for the final act of the Democratic National Convention tonight, and the Trump ticket taking a big campaign promise on the road. This is CBS News 24/7. Thank you for joining us. Our live feeds take us to South Georgia, where Republican VP nominee J.D. Vance is about to speak. So this is in Valdosta, over 200 miles away from Atlanta. Vance will talk about immigration and border security in that city, where the sheriff says it's become a hotbed for drug smugglers along the interstate. When Vance gets to the mic, you'll hear it right here on CBS News 24/7. All right, now taking our maps over to Arizona, where former President Donald Trump will also be focusing on immigration. He will get a tour of the border in a place where his running mate was 3 weeks ago. But we want to start by taking you to Chicago for the fourth and final day of the DNC, and it is a big moment for Vice President Kamala Harris, who will accept her party's nomination for president tonight. So let's bring in CBS News political director Finn Gomez live from Chicago. And Finn, what can we expect to hear from VP Harris tonight? All right, we're going to get to Finn in just a minute. He's expected to talk about the DNC tonight. Obviously, Kamala Harris will be taking the stage. All eyes on what she has to say. So we'll get to the Democratic National Convention and his live report in just a few minutes. But let's take you outside the Democratic National Convention. Pro-Palestinian protesters gathering just a few blocks away there. More than 2,000 people marched near the DNC yesterday. Take a look.
Yesterday's protest ended with no arrests. No one injured, no officers injured, and it shows that when you have some type of contact and collaboration with those who are organizing, that you can have a peaceful First Amendment gathering. And that's what happened yesterday. Yes, did we have a couple of dust-ups? Sure. All right, but those things were quickly rectified. And I can't say enough about the organizers who had their marshals moving along, and when someone was getting out of control, they would step in and help calm that down. So just working in collaboration was very effective.
CBS News national correspondent Roxana Saberi joins us live now from Chicago. Roxana, it is the last day of the convention. Do you expect to see a larger crowd there today?
Hey, Juliette. Well, there was going to be a rally starting about now here in Union Park in Chicago, but we found out just a little bit ago that two rallies will now be combined. So, and that's going to start in a few hours. So the crowd could be larger than they had initially expected. But just for context, the largest rally we've witnessed so far was on Monday by the Coalition to March on the DNC. That was a pro-Palestinian rally for the most part. That had about 2,500 protesters, according to Chicago police. A rally yesterday, another pro-Palestinian rally, the police said had around 2,000 people. So we could see similar numbers. Now, as you just heard, Chicago Police Superintendent Larry Snelling said the permitted gathering yesterday ended peacefully without arrests. And that contrasts with what we saw on Tuesday night in front of the Israeli consulate, when police say they arrested 56 people at an unpermitted rally. Now, all week, protesters here have told us their main message is to end the war in Gaza and to end U.S. support for Israel. Several told us Harris represents a continuation of Biden's policies on the region. This is what one protester told us yesterday.
Culmination of 10 months of being very frustrated with our government and, hoping against hope that they'll finally do the right thing in stopping aid to Israel, because we basically fund everything they do, and it would stop if we stopped every penny. I feel like it would stop.
And Juliette, we've heard similar messages all week.
Roxana, you also spoke with a lawyer who was offering free legal advice to protesters. What have they been saying?
Yeah, I spoke this morning with Matthew McLaughlin. He's with the National Guild of Chicago, and they're offering free legal advice and representation to any protesters who have been arrested here this week. He said all of those protesters who were arrested have now been released as they await their next steps. I asked him what he thought of Superintendent Larry Snelling's previous comments that some of the protesters in front of the Israeli consulate on Tuesday night confronted his officers physically. McLaughlin told me he can't speak to what every protester did or didn't do, but he said that the protesters that his group has been representing were just trying to make their voices heard, and he believes that he said it was the violence that we saw on the streets this week was on behalf of the Chicago Police Department. He said that they used undue force and had what he called an over-the-top police presence. Juliet.
Okay, interesting perspective there. Roxana Saberi. Roxana, thank you so much. So let's get back to CBS News political director Fin Gomez. Live outside the DNC in Chicago, Vice President Kamala Harris will accept her party's nomination for president tonight. So, hello, thanks for joining us. What can we expect to hear from VP Harris this evening?
Yeah, just getting a little bit of information from a Harris Walls campaign official on what we expect the vice president to say tonight in her nominating address to this convention. I mean, first and foremost, this is really her stepping from behind Joe Biden, if you will. American voters have known Joe Biden, they know Donald Trump, and now that she's on top of the ticket, this is really the biggest opportunity for her to really address millions of Americans with just 75 days away until the election. But she's going to be focusing on three things. One is her biography, sharing her story and her record for the American people, talking about coming from being the child and raised by a working mother in a middle-class neighborhood. Also understanding that sort of middle-class background of families like hers. And she's also going to be discussing her time as a prosecutor in California, when she went as a prosecutor, when she was either representing and fighting for survivors of sexual abuse, to homeowners impacted by the foreclosure crisis, and also to contrast what she will say will be her optimistic and hopeful message and vision for the future, in contrasting against Donald Trump's dark and Project 2025 agenda. That, of course, just this morning, Donald Trump did disavow Project 2025, but we do know that there are many former Trump officials who worked in setting that agenda, but she's going to be representing a more optimistic agenda and contrasting that Project 2025 agenda, we're being told. And also just showcasing a deep sense of patriotism, optimism, and hope. Is what we're being told. Also, the expectation is that, even though there's momentum and we're seeing some momentum, that momentum in the polls, it's also, to say that the job is not done. We heard Michelle Obama, the former First Lady, a couple of days ago, say that, that this is still going to be a tight race, and we're expecting to hear some of that as well. But this will be the biggest speech of her political career.
Yeah, quite the buildup leading to the final day for sure. Now, she did that surprise appearance Monday night. Obviously, all eyes on what she's going to be saying tonight. But do you also expect any other speakers tonight, any other surprises possibly on the agenda that you got a little sneak peek into?
Oh, we had a couple of surprises this past week, including Oprah Winfrey, of course, last night with that speech really addressed to independents like her. We did find out just a little time ago that the Chicks, or formerly known as the Dixie Chicks, will be performing the national anthem. We do also expect to hear from some of her VP contender shortlisters like Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, as well as Senator Mark Kelly from the battleground state of Arizona. We are also going to be hearing from senatorial candidate Ruben Gallego from that same battleground state of Arizona, who's in one of the key top races of this cycle. Arizona being a crucial state, as you know, and one that the former president is also visiting today, going to the border today to sort of highlight what they see as the biggest political vulnerability against Vice President Harris, and that's the immigration and the southern border.
Finn, I can't help but notice all the security walking behind you during your live shot. Obviously, big security tonight, as it has been throughout the entire week. Finn, thank you so much for your live report. We'll check back with you. Appreciate it. All right, coming up, it is a major heat alert in effect for parts of Texas. The hot temperatures also mean the demand for power is high. It's actually forcing some schools to close because of no air conditioning. You're watching CBS News 24/7. The Middle East is preparing for another round of ceasefire talks, but it's unclear if they'll begin today after both Israel and Hamas continue to blame each other for trying to derail progress on the agreement. CBS News foreign correspondent Ramy Inocencio has the report from Tel Aviv.
We got guidance from the White House that talks were expected to start today, but so far there has been no word that that's happened. One local Israeli news outlet, though, did report that that may start on Saturday or Sunday to finally put at least a pause, if not an end to this war, going 10.5 months now. We've also learned that Secretary of State Antony Blinken spoke with the Emir of Qatar. That's one of the mediating countries. Blinken seemingly wanted to stress that the so-called bridging proposal that the U.S. has worked on does address areas of disagreement between both Israel and Hamas. But Israel has rejected Hamas's demands for a total ceasefire in Gaza and giving up control of Gaza's border with Egypt. And if ceasefire talks fail, that could trigger Iran and Hezbollah to strike Israel, to commit retaliatory strikes after twin assassinations 3 weeks ago. An Israeli expert on Iran who used to work at Israel's spy agency, the Mossad, says it's actually Iran's proxy, not Iran itself, Iran's proxy Hezbollah to be more worried about. Take a listen.
Hezbollah is close to our borders. It's not Iran, 1,600 kilometers from Israel. It's completely different. The military estimate is around 150,000 rockets and missiles. They have precise missiles. They have a lot of UAVs. This could be a devastating attack on Israel, no question.
And the U.S.'s defense of Israel was the focus when President Biden spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu last night to defend against Iran and all of its proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the Houthis in Yemen, along with militias backed by Iran in various other countries, including Iraq, Syria, and Pakistan. We know that more warplanes have come into the region, more ships, a submarine, all in the region now, and then the USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier strike group with its F-35s just arrived from the Pacific yesterday.
Ramy Inocencio, thank you. Talking about the latest negotiations, how they are ramping up right now. So we'll continue to stay on top of that as well and continue to go back if we need to. Let's staying overseas in Venezuela, where the country's Supreme Court just certified President Nicolas Maduro's claims that he won the election. The court says the voting tallies published online showing he lost by a landslide were forged. Venezuela has seen anti-government protests since the election. Dive teams in Italy are looking for the last missing person from the luxury yacht that sank off the coast of Sicily. 5 bodies have been recovered so far, including the body of British tech tycoon Mike Lynch. 15 were rescued when the yacht went down Monday after it was hit by a possible tornado. Also, dispute over labor. It shut down Canada's 2 main railway companies, locking out nearly 10,000 workers. The work stoppage could deal a major blow to both the U.S. and Canadian economies, depending on how long it lasts. The Teamsters Union is asking for better pay, better benefits, and better crew schedules. Independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is expected to drop out of the race, and that is according to 2 sources familiar with his campaign. Kennedy plans to speak tomorrow at an event in Arizona. Kennedy's campaign reportedly in talks with Donald Trump's team about a possible endorsement. All right, let's jump the map now. We're taking you to Texas. So you're looking live at Fort Worth, that is. It is a major heat alert in effect for parts of the region. In fact, the hot temperatures also mean the demand for power extremely high. And take a look at this. Some schools in the Houston area, they say they're having issues with the air conditioning. At least 1 school had to close.
It feels very humid and hot. It feels like right out here, just in an enclosed space, so the air it doesn't even circulate, just hot air, period. Works kind of like an oven, where it's an enclosed space and it's hot, and it's kind of harder to focus.
Oh, that tells it all. School officials say they're working to get the AC units back up and running and are committed to providing a safe learning environment for students and staff. With that, let's get to Zoe Mintz now to talk about that heat and just the dangers. Those kids saying that basically they can't breathe right now.
Oh, it's absolutely awful. It's very hot out in Texas. In fact, Abilene saw their record high temperature ever since the late 1800s. Yesterday, they broke that. But I want to take a step back and show you all not just the record-breaking high temperatures that we've seen, but also record-breaking low temperatures. We saw a little bit of everything over the past 24 hours. The heat over in Texas, but it's the East Coast that we are concerned about. Not necessarily concerned when it comes to colder temperatures, but the fact that they saw 50 degrees in Atlantic City, 57 in Newburgh, 53 in Buffalo. These are record cold temperatures. For the East Coast for this time of year, this is not normal. But for the heat on the West Coast, that is going to be the much bigger issue as we step out over the next 24 hours. Texas is still the big losers when it comes to that heat that will continue to build over the next 24 to maybe even 48 hours. Hopefully we can pull up this alerts to show you what is going on, but I don't think they want to work right now. That is okay because we can still show you our high temperatures for this afternoon that are going to be warming up to 105, 106 up near Dallas, down into San Antonio and Austin, Texas, where the heat, it will be on. Heat-related illness risk is going to be higher throughout this afternoon. That is something we are going to continue to keep our eyes on, and our thoughts and our prayers are still going out to the people who are dealing with this heat. Luckily, though, Juliet, we are going to be looking at much quieter and much cooler conditions by later this week and this weekend. So there is relief on the way.
Finishing with that glimmer of hope, Zoe. Thank you so much. All right, coming up, Ian Lee reports from near the Ukraine-Russia border on how a Ukrainian drone team is attacking Russia. This is CBS News 24/7. As promised, Senator J.D. Vance is in Georgia right now talking about immigration and border security. So let's listen into what he had to say just moments ago.
Now, we ought to remember here that we have the best country in the world. We got the best workers in the world. We've got the best people in the world. We've got the most beautiful and most abundant natural resources in the world. But the one thing that we have got to do to fix this country is fix the leadership, because as much as we've got incredible blessing and incredible bounty, we have got a screwed up vice president calling the shots, and I think it's time to fire Kamala Harris, not to give her a promotion. Now, I don't know if you saw yesterday, but her VP nominee, Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, gave a little speech at the Democratic National Convention. I will say I appreciate the Democrats not being able to keep anything on time, because I think by the time that he spoke, everybody in the state of Georgia was already in bed. And if you weren't asleep at the beginning of the speech, you were sure as hell asleep by the end of the speech. Ain't that right? But look, it's interesting that they are running, trying to pretend to be tough on crime people. Kamala Harris says that she's now tough on crime. She's got religion. She found Jesus about being tough on crime, and she found it about a month ago when Joe Biden dropped out of the presidential race. Because the record of Kamala Harris and the record of her running mate is doing everything they can to make the lives of our law enforcement harder, to make it harder for them to keep our communities safe. Kamala Harris was the prosecutor in San Francisco, California. And if you think San Francisco, California has been well run from a tough on crime perspective, then I've got another thing to tell you. One of the most, by the way, a beautiful city, San Francisco, California, has been destroyed by the leadership of people like Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris wants to take San Francisco liberalism nationwide, and I think we are not going to let her. Georgia is not going to let her, and it starts right here in Valdosta. Now, let's just run through the contrast a little bit, the difference between Kamala Harris's record on law enforcement and Donald Trump's record. Now, Kamala Harris, she wanted to make sex crimes with minors a nonviolent offense, which means more of these sickos out on the streets of our country. Do we want that? Absolutely not. Kamala Harris wanted to defund the police. She said it on video. Do we want to defund the police? Kamala Harris wants to make it easier for soft-on-crime prosecutors to go after our law enforcement. Do we want that? So do we want Kamala Harris as the prosecutor-in-chief of this country? No, we want Donald J. Trump, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Now, as Kamala Harris was doing all those things, let's remember the record of Donald J. Trump. When Kenosha, Wisconsin, which I was at just a few days ago, Kenosha, Wisconsin was about to burn in a terrible riot, Donald Trump called the governor and affirmatively offered the help of federal officials to stop those riots and to save the city of Kenosha. Donald Trump believes that we ought to properly fund our law enforcement and make sure our police get the pay and the equipment that they need. Donald Trump believes that we ought to stop these soft-on-crime prosecutors. If the police bring in a bad guy, the prosecutors ought to throw him behind bars and keep him there. And most importantly, Donald Trump believes that we ought to make our law enforcement lives easier by closing down that southern border and getting the drug cartels out of our communities. Now, I have to say that Kamala Harris, given that she's so into soft-on-crime policy, she did select a good running mate in Tim Walz. They make quite a dynamic duo. If you remember the riots of summer of 2020 when $13 billion of damage was done to the city of Minneapolis, Tim Walz was the governor of Minnesota, and Tim Walz did everything he could to let those rioters burn down the biggest city in his state. And then Kamala Harris did everything she could to bail out the rioters out of prison, right? What a dynamic duo they make. A dynamic duo for people who don't like law enforcement, a dynamic duo for people who want to make our streets less safe. I happen to believe in a very common sense principle that we're going to back the blue and bring public safety back to Georgia and back to our country. Now, Tim Walz, I will say, I've been beating up on Tim Walz a little bit. You may have seen this. But, you know, Tim Walz loves to go around and say that he carried a weapon in war. That's what Tim Walz says. And, of course, all of the veterans out there will know that Tim Walz never carried a weapon in war. The closest he went to a war zone was Italy, which last time I checked was not a war zone. But in Tim Walz's defense, he did let those rioters burn down Minneapolis, so maybe we should give Tim Walz a little bit of credit. Maybe the combat zone he visited was Minneapolis when he was the governor of Minnesota. But let's hear now from a great leader in Georgia law enforcement, and I just want to make sure I get Ashley's name right here, but we have a great sheriff in Ashley Polk who has made this community safer. Thank you.
And that is Republican vice presidential nominee J.D. Vance speaking on immigration, as you can see right there in Valdosta, Georgia. Those are comments just from a few minutes ago. We're taking some of that news conference, obviously, right there. He's now bringing in a sheriff's deputy from that area. From there, we're going to take you to Arizona on our stream, where CBS News campaign reporter Olivia Rinaldi is going to be giving us a live report where former President Trump is touring the southern border. We'll have that for you coming up. You are streaming CBS News 24/7. And welcome back to CBS News 24/7. Former President Donald Trump is focusing on immigration on the campaign trail. Trump is in Arizona today, where he will be touring the U.S.-Mexico border just south of Tucson. And that is where we find CBS News campaign reporter Olivia Rinaldi. Olivia, thank you for joining us.
Hi, Juliet. How are you?
I'm doing great. So why don't you tell us about this tour today and kind of what's happening right now directly behind you and where you are?
Yeah, Juliet, we're on the border, the U.S.-Mexico border in Arizona. Now, this will be Donald Trump's first visit to the border in Arizona this cycle. He's done 2 other visits, but those have been in Texas. So Trump says he's coming here today to inspect the border. So to my right here, we've got the border wall, but to the left, we have all of these materials of the border wall, what they've used for construction. So Trump says he's coming here today to inspect that, to talk with some of the border officials about what is going on here, some of the things they've experienced with the flow of migrants migrants across the border. And then he also says he's going to be talking to some families of victims who have been the victims of migrants who have come across the border. So he says he's going to be talking with families there, so doing that inspection and then having those remarks behind me. And you know as well as I do that immigration is so central to this campaign, and it's also coming on the final day of the Democratic National Convention. And that's what's really key here is Trump wants to make immigration so central that while Vice President Kamala Harris is delivering her nomination acceptance speech tonight, he's going to be reminding people about immigration, about the flow of migrants, and making that one of his key points.
Yeah, Olivia, we're also hearing that former President Trump may be getting an endorsement from Robert F. Kennedy Jr. So what are you hearing about that possibility and the timeline?
A lot of rumors swirling around that. We do know that tomorrow Donald Trump will be going to Las Vegas for an event talking about tax on tips, and then he'll be coming back to Arizona rather for an event in Phoenix. But we're also hearing that Robert Kennedy Jr. will also be in Phoenix tomorrow, and he says he has a big announcement about the state of the race, and that piqued a lot of our interest about what that could possibly be. We're learning a lot more that he is considering perhaps suspending his campaign and endorsing Trump. Now, Trump officials that I have spoken to have pointed this back to the Kennedy campaign, said that decision is entirely up to him. So we will be watching closely tomorrow to see if there is a big endorsement. And that is something, Juliet, that would really shake up this race. That would perhaps give a boost to former President Donald Trump as Kennedy has taken some share of his support. So something we'll be watching there, especially as we head closer towards November.
I can't help but hear all of the music behind you. Is that where the rally is going to take place and where he'll be touring in the area? Is it outdoor, indoor? What is the setup?
We're outdoor. You're hearing some of that music. I am right next to the speaker, so it is quite loud. Apologies if you're having trouble hearing me there. It's not quite a rally, but it'll be remarks that he's having behind. And so he will be doing that border tour first and then coming and giving those remarks behind me.
No, we don't mind the music. We feel like we're there and we kind of know what the scene will be like. So thanks for bearing with us as I ask you questions to the music.
Yeah, you're in the heat with me.
We are. Olivia, thank you for your report. Appreciate it. All right, let's go to Chicago now. It is the fourth and final day of the DNC. And tonight, Vice President Kamala Harris is set to accept the Democratic Party's nomination for president. Last night, her running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, he gave a rousing pep talk as he accepted the vice presidential nomination. Here's DNC co-chair and New Jersey Senator Cory Booker.
Walz is a special kind of guy. And what you saw last night and what you felt last night is real. And so many Americans are looking for that. We've witnessed too much of the politics of demeaning and degrading. And in Donald Trump, I will tell you, he is a guy that so indiscriminately degrades Americans that even Republicans are not safe. He's been degrading DeSantis about his height, my friend, Chris Christie, about his weight, Nikki Haley about her heritage, John McCain about his military service. And so to see in Walz and so many of the other folks that are supporting this incredible ticket, this idea that we're not about putting people down, we're about lifting people up. And so tonight we're going to hear from Kamala Harris. And I am so excited. It's like a proud sibling. She and I served together in the Senate. I know who she is. I know what she's about. And I can't wait until America hears from her.
All right, CBS News' Skylar Henry joining us live now from Chicago. Obviously, a very big night at that convention center as Kamala Harris takes the stage. So what can we expect from her speech tonight, Skylar?
Hey, Juliet, always good to see you. I think what the senator just said there, saying that he knows her well, knows what she stands for, is what the vice president will certainly have to do tonight in order to stick the landing, so to speak, on this final day of the convention. Really sort of give this national audience an opportunity to reintroduce herself, if you will. And that's not only about her background, where she comes from, that middle-class upbringing in California, but also her life of service as a prosecutor in California, and then, of course, serving as a senator and now as vice president. We have seen tidbits of what may potentially be in her speech. She will obviously talk about her background, also juxtaposing why she feels as if she is the better option as opposed to former President Trump, will also lay her agenda out, if you will, as it relates to policies, everything from looking out for the middle class, building it up, building it out, trying to reduce costs for everyday Americans, especially as it relates to grocery store costs and gas station costs, and also looking to lower costs. And we heard this from Governor Walz just yesterday, to try to allow folks who are buying a home for the first time so that they can be able to do so. So I think we'll hear quite a bit of that, while also a bit of patriotism, as she that's been a running theme over the course of the last several days, about how the vice president feels about her service and time here in the country, and why she wants to be the next president.
Yeah, it is her moment to transition from vice president to appearing presidential at this particular night. I can only help but see how quiet it is behind you as everyone's getting ready. I mean, Skylar, it is going to be electric tonight. Are you ready for it?
Yeah, you know, this is the calm before the final day of the convention, and really that follows, 3 days of electricity. We've seen stars, we've seen top Democrats really sort of hit the stage here and set a pretty decent production over the course of the last few days, talking about everything about why they feel as if the vice president and governor should be the ones for the job, but also leaning into what they feel are important issues up and down the ballot, especially as it relates to trying to win the House, maintain the Senate, and then, of course, win the White House as well. And I think we will sort of see all of that culminate tonight. Still waiting to see if there might be some special surprises. We've seen quite a few already. Oprah Winfrey was one of them yesterday, and so I think many people will be glued. The rumors have been swirling. I won't come out and say who might be out there just yet, but certainly one thing to pay attention to, especially out of the vice president's remarks later on tonight.
Oh, you have me guessing now. All right, Skylar Henry.
It's a tease, Juliet. A tease.
It was really good. All right, Skylar, thank you. Appreciate it. All right, heading overseas now. High temperatures fueling a brush fire in Rome. 4 people, including a firefighter, were injured in the blaze. The fire broke out yesterday and spread close to homes. The region has been hit with dangerous fire conditions. Just last month, a large fire broke out near the Rome Court of Justice and a public TV station. All right, a lot to talk about weather-wise. Let's go to Zoe Minsnow. You were talking about some of the rain in the area and possibly Burning Man. I can't help but think about those images from last year, like right behind you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure many of us remember all of the crazy footage from Burning Man last year, where people were trapped because the road that once was dirt turned into mud. There were people stuck in it. There were people that were trapped there. And it doesn't take a lot of rain to turn the desert that's normally dirt into a desert full of mud. So let's take a closer look at that system that is likely going to be impacting places across the west coast of the United States, and also including the Pacific Northwest and Nevada, where Burning Man is taking place. If we do take a closer look at those 2 larger systems that are impacting the United States, there's that high pressure system that's brought record-breaking heat down near Texas. It's just been sitting over Texas, and they have not really gotten any sort of a break. But it's this low pressure system that will be impacting the west coast of the United States that is going to be bringing the potential for a little bit of rain to places like Nevada, and bringing some significant rainfall across the Pacific Northwest, along with a big cool down. Let's take a closer look at that cool down that's on the way, along with some windy conditions that will also begin to pick up as well. All things that we are going to continue to keep our eyes on over the next 24 to 48 hours. That large low pressure system will be making its way across the Pacific Northwest, and look at all of that cool air it brings with it all the way down to the Sierra Nevada. Temperatures will be about 30 degrees below average, and the potential for a little bit of snow in the higher elevation of the Sierra Nevada mountains. That's going to be a slightly bigger issue, but it's not really going to accumulate for many of us. We are likely going to barely see any snow flurries across those highest elevations, but like we showed you, the Nevada area where Burning Man is taking place is going to be seeing some rain, and it doesn't take a lot to turn the desert from dirt to mud. All things we'll be keeping our eyes on over the next 24 hours as that very early autumn storm system arrives to the Pacific Northwest. Back to you.
Yeah, but it's a good heads up to anyone heading to Burning Man. Thank you, Zoe. All right, Canada's major freight railroads have come to a full stop because of a contract dispute with their workers, and it's sparking concerns over potential damage to U.S. businesses. CBS News Detroit's Gino Vici joins us live live from Ferndale, Michigan now. So, Gino, thanks for joining us. How could this work stoppage affect supply chains in the U.S.?
Well, Juliet, thank you, and good morning to you. And that is certainly the question that everyone is asking right now. How could a potential strike affect industries across the country? Now, the two Canadian rail companies, we're talking about Canadian National Railway and Canadian Pacific Kansas City, have locked out their employees effective 12:01 early this morning as a result of not agreeing to a labor contract. Now, the work stoppage affects engineers, conductors, yard workers, and dispatchers. Now, according to the union, at the heart of the labor dispute is the length of the workday. Currently, the average is about 10 hours per day. The rail companies want to be able to extend that to 12 hours a day. The unions are opposed to that increase. Now, the unions also want a minimum amount of rest between days off. A strike could affect a wide array of industries, including agricultural, chemical, medical, fuel, and of course, automotive. A spokesperson for General Motors said this about the ongoing labor disputes at the Canadian Railways, quote, "We have a contingency plan in place and do not expect our operations to be significantly affected in the short term. We are watching closely to gauge potential impact on our plants and suppliers," end quote. Now, the Teamsters Canada Union representing those members say the CN and the CPKC are compromising worker safety. They're tearing families apart just to make a few extra bucks. Now, Canadian officials are monitoring this situation closely, as well as officials here in the U.S. Live in Ferndale, Gino Vici, CBS News. Back to you.
Gino, thank you. We'll check on the timeline and see how long this possibly may last. Appreciate your live report there for us. Coming up, Ian Lee reporting for us from near the Ukraine-Russia border on how a Ukrainian drone team is attacking Russia. This is CBS News 24/7. The Italian Coast Guard says divers recovered the body of British tech billionaire Mike Lynch. Lynch was among the 6 passengers missing when his super yacht capsized near Sicily on Monday. So 4 other bodies were recovered yesterday. And now, right now, the search is on for the last person believed to be Lynch's daughter. BBC foreign correspondent Bethany Bell has the report.
The painstaking search for the final missing person continues here. Overhead, I can hear the sound of helicopters. They've been flying quite low over the harbour. Also, police drones have been in operation. And out to sea, around the site where the yacht went down, vessels and boats from the Coast Guard are circling the area. The divers are continuing their search 50 metres down on the seabed, 164 feet or so down. It's extremely difficult work. The yacht is on its side. Now, the bodies that have been recovered have been taken for autopsies and for the formal identification process. We also know that an investigation is underway and the captain of the yacht has been questioned.
In the midst of this year's election, people are pushing plenty of issues to the forefront, including the war between Ukraine and Russia. This morning at a Kentucky Farm Bureau event, Senator Mitch McConnell made a case for aid to Ukraine and why this is a bipartisan problem that the next president needs to address.
What is the big challenge ahead? You could argue it's a situation potentially more challenging than World War II. You've got an axis of evil. North Korea, China, Russia, Iran, and Iran's proxies, all talking to each other. What do they have in common? They're all authoritarian regimes. They hate democracy. And they're competing with all of the democratic countries around the world. The Russians must fail because it is a lot bigger than the border between Ukraine and Russia. These are brave people fighting for their independence against one of our biggest adversaries in the world. Why in the world will we not want to help them? This is a big problem going forward. I'm convinced we can prevent the next war by doing a better job of being prepared for it. So no matter who wins the presidential race, and obviously I have a preference, but no matter who wins it, This issue needs to be front and center.
Senator Mitch McConnell there. Meanwhile, Russia is moving around its troops to bolster its defenses near Kursk, where Ukraine is pushing its incursion. CBS News correspondent Ian Lee reports from near the Ukraine-Russia border on how a Ukrainian drone team is attacking Russia.
Ukraine is keeping up with the drone attacks deep inside Russia. The latest hit an air base in the country's southern Volgograd region. Plumes of black smoke and explosions could be seen coming from it. And the governor of the region didn't say what facility had been hit, but that there were no casualties. Drones have completely changed the nature of warfare. Both sides are looking for an advantage. We met with one drone unit from the 117 Territorial Defense Brigade, and they showed us how they arm and operate a drone that costs roughly $400. And what's remarkable is how that simple weapon can take out a multi-million-dollar piece of armor. Their mission now is to support operations in the Kursk region, and they play a critical role. When we spoke to a commander who's been fighting on the ground, he couldn't speak highly enough about how drones are helping him push forward by taking out targets while also protecting his men. Counter-drone warfare has also changed, and that's been a struggle for both sides. What I found interesting is no matter who has the upper hand, Ukraine or Russia, China is the big winner. Both Kyiv and Moscow not only get their drones from there, but also source the means to counter and jam them. The fear that China could someday cut Ukraine off has fueled efforts by Kyiv to develop and mass produce their own cheap drones. Ian Lee, CBS News, Byrotin, Ukraine.
Ian Lee, thank you. All right, let's bring in our Nevada map now and a live look inside a courtroom in Las Vegas for the trial of Robert Tellis. He is the former Clark County administrator accused of killing Las Vegas Review-Journal reporter Jeff Gehrman, who wrote critical articles about Tellis. The former elected official is back on the witness stand. There he is after maintaining his innocence yesterday, claiming that he was framed. All right, let's take you back out live now to Fort Worth, Texas. Boy, parts of the region under an excessive heat warning right now. The triple-digit temperatures are being blamed for at least 2 deaths. And Zoe, it is certainly going to be another dangerous day there. Kids actually not going to school. A lot of school closures because of air conditioning problems.
Oh my gosh, you cannot survive in this kind of heat without air conditioning. And Abilene, Texas actually saw their hottest ever day. They got up to 113 yesterday. Today they're going to be a couple of degrees cooler, but it is still going to be in the triple digits. I do want to take a step back, though, and show you all the record cold temperatures that we saw this morning, because we're seeing record hot temperatures and record cold temperatures this time of year, especially as we step out. Oh, these are actually our daytime highs. So let's take a first look at what we're going to be seeing this afternoon, because it is going to be a hot one all across Texas. We're going to be seeing those temperatures well above the triple digits from San Antonio down into Austin near Abilene, where again there are going to be excessive heat warnings in effect, heat advisories in effect, and those will continue throughout the next 24 to 48 hours before finally beginning to feel a little bit more of that comfortable heat. If we do take a look at our heat-related illness map, yes, it is very high over Texas. There is that bullseye, those areas in dark purple. That is where the risk for heat-related illness is the highest. But you will notice over the next couple of days that risk gets smaller and smaller as cooler air begins to move in. So there is some relief on the way, Juliet, but unfortunately, it is going to be another couple of days that they're going to have to deal with this heat first.
Boy, relief can't come soon enough, though, to people in Texas. All right, Zoe, thank you so much. All right, before we go, we're going to take you back out live now to the Democratic National Convention, where the stage is set for Vice President Kamala Harris and presidential candidate and nominee to take the stage tonight for her final speech. All eyes on Kamala Harris, and it is her 10th wedding anniversary on this very night as well. That's it for us at CBS News 24/7. Thanks for joining.